They say madness is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. By that definition, humanity is the most insane species in the galaxy. Every rational civilization learns to retreat when faced with impossible odds. Every sensible race calculates risk versus reward and chooses survival over glory. Every intelligent species in the known universe has one universal constant: self-preservation. Except humans. I am Zektar Vorthak, former fleet admiral of the Hegemony's 3rd Expeditionary Force, and I have witnessed something that will haunt me until my final breath dissolves into the cosmic void. I have seen humans charge in a certain death with smiles on their faces. I have watched them sacrifice everything for strangers they've never met. I have observed them turn hopeless battles into legendary victories through nothing but sheer, stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The galaxy calls it madness. The galaxy calls it recklessness. The galaxy calls it the reason why 13 different stellar empires maintain human contingency protocols in their military databases. But I know the truth now. What we mistake for insanity is actually something far more terrifying and far more beautiful. It's the reason why, when the Devourer fleets emerged from dark space with technology that made our greatest weapons look like sharpened sticks, every species in the galaxy looked to humanity for salvation. Not because they were the strongest, not because they were the smartest, because they were the only ones crazy enough to fight the unfightable. This is the story of how I learned that sometimes madness is just another word for hope. The first time I saw humans fight, I thought they were malfunctioning. It was 3 stellar cycles ago, during what the historical archives now call the Proxima Border Incident. I commanded the HFS Eternal Resolve, a hegemony dreadnought with enough firepower to glass a small moon. We were conducting routine patrol operations along the disputed boundary between hegemony space and the newly contacted human territories when our sensors detected an unauthorized vessel. The ship was smaller than our shuttlecraft, a ridiculous bronze-colored thing that looked like someone had welded scrap metal together in a zero-gravity environment during an earthquake. According to our databases, it was designated as a human exploration vessel, though exploration seemed an optimistic term for what appeared to be a flying debris field held together by hope and electromagnetic tape. Admiral, my tactical officer Yexai reported, his 4 eyes focusing independently on multiple displays. The vessel is broadcasting on all frequencies. They're requesting permission to dock. I stared at the tactical hologram floating before my command throne. The human ship was a tiny speck against the vast bulk of my dreadnought. It would have been like a grain of sand requesting permission to land on a mountain. They want to dock. I asked, certain I had misheard. With us. Confirmed, Admiral. They're also transmitting what they call first contact protocols and something they term friendship cookies. Friendship cookies. The translation matrix struggled with the concept, eventually settling on small, edible tokens of non-aggressive intent. In 300 years of military service, spanning conflicts with the mechanical Vorthak Collective, the hive-minded Scarret, and the energy beings of the Epsilon Nebula, I had never encountered an opening gambit quite so bizarre. Sir, Communications Officer Talmor interjected, they're also broadcasting music. Music? Yes, sir. Something they call jazz. Our analysts believe it might be some form of psychological warfare, though the pattern seemed designed to promote calm rather than aggression. I activated the external visual feed and watched the tiny human craft performing what could only be described as a dance around my ship's hull. It spiraled and looped, leaving trails of some kind of colorful particulate matter in its wake. If this was military doctrine, it was unlike anything in the tactical manuals. Patch me through to their communications array, I commanded. The main screen flickered, revealing the interior of the human vessel. The sight that greeted me defied every assumption I had about intelligent life. Instead of the expected command bridge with proper military hierarchy and ceremonial intimidation protocols, I saw what appeared to be organized chaos. 3 humans moved around a space barely large enough to contain them. One wearing what looked like colorful fabric arranged in complex patterns, another covered in metallic accessories that served no apparent function, and a third whose cranial hair had been deliberately arranged to defy gravitational norms. Greetings, massive and impressive vessel of unknown origin. The human in front spoke with what our translation protocols identified as excessive enthusiasm. I am Captain Sarah Chun of the exploration ship Lucky Strike, and we are absolutely thrilled to make your acquaintance. This is an incredibly exciting day for humanity, and we hope it's at least moderately interesting for you as well. I found myself momentarily speechless. In my experience, first contact scenarios followed predictable patterns: identification, capability assessment, territorial negotiation, and either trade agreements or military posturing. This human had somehow managed to skip all established protocols and jump directly to something that resembled joy. I am Fleet Admiral Zektar Vordhak of the Hegemony 3rd Expeditionary Force, I replied, falling back on standard military courtesy. Your vessel has entered sovereign hegemony space without authorization. Please state your intentions. Oh, we're exploring. Captain Chin replied immediately. We detected your energy signatures from about 12 light years away and thought, wow, someone should definitely go introduce themselves to whoever can build something that awesome. So here we are. We brought cookies. My tactical officer leaned toward my command throne. Admiral, their ship's weapons systems are. He paused, consulting his displays with obvious confusion. Sir, they don't appear to have weapon systems. That's impossible. Every spacefaring civilization develops weapons. Negative on armaments, sir. No energy weapons, no kinetic projectiles, no defensive measures of any kind. However, they do have what appears to be an extensive hydroponics bay and something our scanners identify as a rec room. I stare at the view screen where Captain Shun was now gesturing animatedly at something off camera. Behind her, one of the other humans was doing something with their hands that created rhythmic acoustic vibrations, what our databases had classified as music production. Captain Shun, I said slowly, are you saying your species travels through deep space in unarmed vessels for the sole purpose of meeting strangers? Well, when you put it like that, it sounds kind of crazy, she admitted with what appeared to be a facial expression indicating amusement. But how else are we supposed to meet people? We figured anyone advanced enough for interstellar travel was probably interesting enough to be worth the risk. The risk, I repeated. Sure, space is dangerous, and aliens might be hostile. But they also might be friendly, and we'd never know unless we tried. Besides, she gestured broadly at the screen. Look how cool your ship is. We've been speculating about your propulsion system for the last 6 hours. Is that some kind of gravitic manipulation? The energy patterns are fascinating. My engineering officer, Kethral, suddenly perked up. Admiral, they're correct about our gravitic systems. Their analysis is surprisingly sophisticated for a first contact species. You've been analyzing our technology? I asked, feeling the first stirrings of proper military caution. Oh yes. Well, the external signatures anyway. We're not trying to hack your systems or anything. That would be terribly rude. We're just curious about how everything works. Actually, would you like to know about our propulsion system? It's not nearly as elegant as yours. but we're pretty proud of it." Before I could respond, Captain Chin launched into an enthusiastic explanation of something called an Alcubierre drive that somehow used controlled space-time distortion to achieve faster-than-light travel. What struck me wasn't the technology itself, though it was impressively innovative for such a young species, but the fact that she was freely sharing technical specifications with a potentially hostile alien force. "Captain," I interrupted, "are you not concerned that this information could be used against your people?" She paused, looking genuinely puzzled. "Why would you want to use it against us? We're not doing anything to you. Besides, if you wanted to hurt us, you could probably just sneeze in our direction and turn our ship into component atoms. Your vessel mass is approximately 40,000 times more than ours and appears to have enough firepower to sterilize a planetary surface. You realize this, and yet you still approached us? Well, yeah. What's the worst that could happen?" I found myself staring at her in what I would later recognize as my first encounter with humanity's most defining characteristic: the complete inability to be deterred by rational fear. This tiny human, commanding a vessel that my ship could accidentally destroy simply by activating our maneuvering thrusters, was asking what could go wrong while floating next to enough concentrated military might to reduce her entire ship to constituent particles. "The worst that could happen," I said carefully, "is that we could destroy you." "Okay, but what's the best that could happen?" She countered immediately. "We could become friends. We could share knowledge, trade stories, maybe learn some of your music to go with our jazz. We could discover that the universe is full of interesting people instead of empty space and dead rocks. Isn't that possibility worth the risk?" I looked around my command bridge at my experienced, battle-tested crew. HFY was running continuous threat assessments on a vessel that couldn't threaten a civilian transport. Talmor was attempting to decode psychological warfare that consisted of improvised musical compositions about the beauty of distant stars. Kethral was furiously taking notes on propulsion technology that the humans had explained in detail within minutes of first contact. "Captain Chun," I said finally, "I believe there may be something wrong with your species." Her face brightened considerably. "Oh, absolutely. We're completely insane by any rational standard. We leave perfectly safe planets to explore dangerous unknowns. We approach massive alien warships with gift baskets, and we keep trying to make friends with things that could kill us. It's a terrible survival strategy. Then why do you do it?" For the first time since the conversation began, Captain Chin's expression grew serious. "Because, Admiral, the alternative is staying home and never knowing what's out here. Yes, space is dangerous. Yes, we might encounter hostile species or natural phenomena that could destroy us. But we might also find beauty we never imagined, knowledge that transforms our understanding of existence, and friends we never knew we needed." She gestured at the view screen, encompassing both our ships and the star field beyond. "Look at what just happened here. An hour ago, we were two species who knew nothing about each other. Now we're having conversation across the void, sharing technology and music and ideas. Isn't that miraculous? Isn't that worth the risk?" I felt something shift in my understanding, though I couldn't yet identify what it was. "You are either the bravest species I've ever encountered, or the most foolish." "Probably both," she agreed cheerfully. "But we're having fun doing it. Speaking of which, would you like to try some of our cookies? They're chocolate chip. It's a traditional Earth flavor that we think you might enjoy. We can transfer them via our airlocks if you have compatible atmospheric systems." And that was how I found myself, 3 hours later, sharing confectionery items with a human exploration crew in one of my ship's briefing rooms. The cookies were, I had to admit, surprisingly pleasant. though not as surprising as watching Captain Shen's engineer explain their artificial gravity system to Kethral with the same enthusiasm most species reserve for discussing their greatest military victories. The really clever part, the human engineer, Martinez, I think his name was, explained while sketching diagrams on a portable display device, is that we figured out how to make the field asymmetric. So we can have normal gravity in the living spaces, but variable gravity in the workshop areas. Makes it easier to handle large components or delicate assembly work. Kethral was practically vibrating with excitement. Brilliant! We've always used uniform fields because we assumed asymmetry would create dangerous instabilities. Oh, it does if you're not careful. We lost 3 prototype ships before we figured out the harmonic dampening equations. But the applications are worth it. You lost 3 ships? I interjected. With crews. Unmanned prototypes. Captain Chen clarified quickly. We're adventurous, not suicidal. Well, mostly not suicidal. There was that incident with the solar probe, but that was a special case. I decided I didn't want to know about the solar probe incident. What I was beginning to understand, however, was that humanity's approach to exploration was fundamentally different from every other species in the galaxy. The hegemony explored to expand territory and resources. The Vorthat Collective explored to identify potential threats. The energy beings of Epsilon explored to catalog stellar phenomena for their vast computational matrices. Humans, apparently, explored for the simple joy of discovering what was out there. Captain Chun, I said as our informal meeting drew to a close, I must ask, what happens when your people encounter genuine hostility? Species that cannot be reasoned with or befriended. Her expression grew thoughtful. We try to understand them first. Sometimes what looks like hostility is just fear or miscommunication. But if something is genuinely trying to hurt innocent people, she paused, and for just a moment, I caught a glimpse of something harder beneath her cheerful exterior. While we protect ourselves and others, we don't go looking for fights, Admiral, but we don't run from them either, even against superior forces, especially against superior forces. Someone has to stand up for the people who can't defend themselves. Might as well be the crazy humans with their friendship cookies and jury-rigged spaceships. As I escorted the human delegation back to their vessel, I found myself deeply troubled by our encounter. Not because they had proven hostile or deceptive, quite the opposite. I was troubled because they had revealed something about the galaxy that I had never considered before. In all my years of service, I had operated under the assumption that survival was the highest priority for any intelligent species. Territory, resources, technological advancement, military superiority, all of these were means to the ultimate end of ensuring your people's continued existence. It was logical, rational, and universal. But the humans seemed to value something else above survival, the possibility of connection. They willingly entered dangerous situations not for gain, but for the chance that they might find something wonderful. They shared freely with strangers, offered friendship to potential enemies, and approached the unknown with curiosity instead of caution. It was, by any reasonable standard, completely insane. It was also the most beautiful thing I had ever witnessed. As the Lucky Strike performed its spiral dance away from my dreadnought, Captain Chen's final transmission echoed through my command bridge. Thank you for being awesome, Admiral. Safe travels, and we hope to see you again soon. The universe is a much friendlier place than we expected. My tactical officer, Yexhai, broke the contemplative silence that followed. Admiral, should we file a standard first contact report? I stared at the diminishing point of light that marked the human vessel's departure. Hi, I don't think there's anything standard about what we just experienced. Sir, file it under anomalous contact. Further study recommended. And hi, yes, Admiral. At a personal note, recommend immediate cultural exchange protocols. The humans may be insane, but their insanity might be exactly what the galaxy needs. I didn't know it then, but those words would prove more prophetic than I ever imagined. Within a standard year, reports of human exploration vessels would flood in from across the galaxy. Ships with names like Wandering Star, Cosmic Curiosity, and Why Not would appear in systems spanning dozens of sectors, their crews eager to share cookies and stories with anyone willing to listen. And in every case, the pattern was the same: confusion followed by bewilderment, followed by something approaching wonder. The humans were changing the galaxy simply by being themselves, spreading their particular brand of optimistic madness to every species they encountered. I should have realized then that such a force, once unleashed, would be impossible to contain. I should have understood that a species capable of treating first contact as an opportunity for friendship would approach every challenge in the universe with the same fearless curiosity. But I was still thinking like a rational being, operating under the assumption that the universe followed predictable rules. It would take the arrival of the Devourer fleets to teach me that sometimes the most irrational response is the only sane one available. Sometimes madness is just another word for hope. And sometimes the crazy humans with their friendship cookies are the only ones brave enough to carry that hope into the darkness. 6 months after my first encounter with Captain Sean, I learned that human insanity was not limited to exploration. The call came through standard hegemony channels at 0347 hours shipboard time, routing directly to my personal command frequency with a priority classification I had seen only 3 times in my military career. I materialized in my command center, still wearing sleep robes, my forearms fumbling with the holographic interface as my crew scrambled to their stations around me. Report: I ordered, my primary eyes focusing on the tactical display, while my secondary eyes scanned personnel readouts. Admiral, Communications Officer Talmore's voice carried an edge of controlled panic. We're receiving an emergency distress signal from the Avalon system. It's not from hegemony forces, sir. Explain. The transmission is from something called the Human Colonial Administration of New Avalon. They're requesting immediate military assistance against what they describe as aggressive xenomorphic entities of unknown origin. I felt my dorsal plates rise in what my species considered the equivalent of raised eyebrows. Humans have established a colony? When? According to the timestamp, sir, approximately 4 months ago. The planet was listed in our surveys as uninhabitable, Class 7 atmospheric toxicity, extreme radiation bursts from binary stellar instability, and indigenous life forms rated as hostile beyond recommended settlement parameters. And the humans settled there anyway? Apparently so, sir. The distress signal indicates a colony population of approximately 50,000 individuals under attack by what they term giant murder lizards with acid spit and bad attitudes. I stared at the main display as the tactical computer assembled what little data we had on the Avalon system. The humans had somehow established a thriving colony on a world that the hegemony had classified as unsuitable for anything more complex than automated mining operations. More than that, they had done it in secret without notifying any of the galactic governance bodies or requesting territorial permits. It was typical human behavior: impossible, irrational, and somehow successful until it wasn't. Set course for Avalon system. Maximum acceleration. I commanded. And give me everything we have on the indigenous life forms. What the archives revealed as we traveled through hyperspace made the humans' colonization attempt seem even more insane than usual. The native species of Avalon Prime were designated as Apex Predator Classification Alpha, creatures that had evolved in the planet's toxic environment to hunt anything that moved. Previous survey missions had lost 3 separate research teams to creatures described as highly aggressive reptilian entities with acid-based weaponry and pack hunting behaviors. The hegemony had declared the planet off-limits after the last survey team's final transmission. They're coming up through the ground now. Dozens of them. Whatever you do, don't let anyone else come here. This place is a death trap. That was 67 years ago, when we dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Avalon system. Our sensors immediately detected what should have been impossible. Massive orbital installations, active communications networks, and energy signatures consistent with a thriving industrial civilization. The humans hadn't just survived on Avalon Prime. They had built a world. Admiral Science Officer Rethmal reported from her station, "I'm reading multiple orbital platforms, atmospheric processing stations, and what appears to be a space elevator connecting the surface to a major orbital facility. The energy output suggests a population significantly larger than the 50,000 mentioned in their distress call." How much larger? Conservative estimate? 7 to 8 million inhabitants, sir. I found myself staring at the tactical display with something approaching disbelief. They built a civilization of 8 million people on a planet that killed trained military surveyors. Apparently so, sir. And, according to their emergency broadcasts, they're currently under siege. The distress signals painted a picture that made even less sense than the colony's existence. Massive creatures were emerging from underground cave systems, attacking settlements across multiple continents. The humans were describing coordinated assaults by creatures with capabilities far beyond what our original surveys had documented. "Admiral," Talmor announced, "we're receiving a direct communication from the planet's surface. Someone identifying themselves as Governor Saratacha." I felt a moment of recognition. "The exploration captain." "Unknown, sir. Shall I patch it through?" Immediately. The main screen shifted to show what appeared to be a military command center in the middle of a battle. Explosions flashed beyond reinforced windows, while figures in combat gear moved urgently between tactical stations. At the center of it all stood a familiar figure, older, bearing scars that hadn't been there during our first meeting, but unmistakably the same human who had offered me cookies 6 months earlier. "Admiral Vorthak." Governor Chen's voice carried genuine relief despite the chaos around her. "Thank the stars you received our signal. Things are getting pretty intense down here." "Governor Chen," I replied, still trying to process what I was seeing. "I must admit, I'm somewhat surprised to find you commanding a colony that, according to our records, shouldn't exist." She grinned, an expression that seemed wildly inappropriate given the circumstances. "Yeah, we get that reaction a lot. Turns out your surveys were about 60% accurate. The planet is incredibly dangerous. The native life forms are absolutely terrifying, and the environmental conditions would kill most species within hours." "Then how—" "Oh, that's the other 40%, she interrupted as another explosion lit up the windows behind her. "The planet also has some of the richest mineral deposits in the galaxy. The binary star system creates unique energy patterns that are perfect for advanced manufacturing, and the hostile indigenous life forms make fantastic guard dogs once you figure out how to communicate with them." I felt my worldview shifting again. "You domesticated the apex predators?" Domesticated is a strong word. More like reached a mutual understanding. We help them control the really aggressive species from the deep caves. They help us spot potential threats and occasionally provide transportation services. Everyone wins. As if to punctuate her words, something enormous moved past the windows behind her. A creature easily the size of a hegemony assault transport, with gleaming scales and multiple rows of teeth visible even at distance. Instead of attacking the human installation, however, it appeared to be moving in formation with several smaller human aircraft. "That's Rex," Governor Chan explained casually. "He's our early warning system for the deep cave emergencies. Great sense of smell, surprisingly good tactical instincts, and he really likes it when we scratch behind his ear plates. The creature that destroyed 3 survey teams is named Rex. Different species entirely. The survey teams ran into tunnel stalkers, territorial ambush predators that see anything in their domain as a threat. Rex and his family are surface hunters, pack creatures that need cooperation to survive. Once we figured out that the 2 species are natural enemies, it was just a matter of aligning interests. The entire conversation was taking place while what appeared to be a full-scale military engagement raged around her. Through the windows, I could see energy weapons firing, massive creatures moving in coordinated patterns, and what looked like human aircraft providing close air support for ground forces that included both people and indigenous creatures fighting side by side. "Governor," I said, trying to focus on the immediate crisis, "what exactly is attacking you?" Her expression grew more serious. "Something we've never seen before. They started emerging from the deepest cave systems 3 days ago. Creatures that make our local apex predators look like house pets. They're bigger, stronger, more aggressive, and they seem to be specifically targeting our population centers. Territorial disputa. That's what we thought initially, but the pattern is all wrong. These things aren't defending territory. They're systematically trying to exterminate everything on the surface. Our local allies are just as scared of them as we are." I processed this information while watching what appeared to be a coordinated defense involving humans, domesticated apex predators, and aerial support platforms working in perfect synchronization. "What do you need from us?" "Honestly, we're not sure. We've been holding our own so far, but these deep dwellers just keep coming. Intelligence suggests they have some kind of hive structure in the planet's core, and they might be preparing for a final push against our major population centers. Estimated enemy numbers? Conservative estimate? Several million individual hostiles, with size classifications ranging from large and angry to how is that thing even structurally possible." I looked around my command bridge and my veteran crew, all of whom were staring at the display with expressions of professional disbelief. We were discussing a colonial defense scenario involving millions of hostile aliens on a planet that shouldn't support human life, being defended by a population that shouldn't exist, using tactics that included domesticated apex predators as military assets. It was, even by human standards, completely insane. "Governor Chun," I said slowly, "are you requesting formal military assistance from the hegemony?" "Oh no," she replied immediately. "We're not part of the hegemony, and we don't want to drag you into what's essentially our problem. We're just hoping you might have some tactical advice, or maybe some heavy equipment we could borrow. We've got payment ready. Our mineral extraction operations have been pretty successful. You're offering to pay us to help you defend a colony that exists in violation of multiple galactic safety protocols?" "Well, when you put it like that, it sounds kind of crazy," she admitted. "But we've got refined elements that your databases suggest are pretty rare in hegemony space, and we've developed some manufacturing techniques that might interest your engineering core. Plus, we make really good coffee now. Our agricultural teams figure out how to modify earth plants to thrive in local soil conditions. I found myself facing a decision that would have been simple under normal circumstances. An unauthorized colony facing extermination should not be my concern. The humans had chosen to settle on a death world without permission or support. The logical response was to let them face the consequences of their choices. But as I watched Governor Chun coordinate her defense through the chaos of battle, I realized that the logical response was not the right response. These humans had done something impossible. They had taken a world that killed everything that touched it and turned it into a home. They had befriended creatures that had terrorized, trained military forces, and built a civilization that thrived in conditions that would destroy most advanced species. And now they were fighting for their lives against odds that would have caused any rational species to evacuate immediately, refusing to abandon the impossible dream they had somehow made real. "Tal Moore," I said quietly. "What's our transit time to the surface?" "Approximately 47 minutes using combat drop pods, sir." "And our combat readiness status?" "Full war footing, Admiral. 3rd Expeditionary Force is ready for immediate deployment." I looked at the screen where Governor Chun was still coordinating her defense, apparently unaware that she had just convinced a hegemony fleet admiral to commit an act of military intervention on behalf of an illegal colony. In the background, I could see humans and aliens working together with the kind of seamless cooperation that military forces spent years trying to achieve. "Governor Chun," I said, making a decision that would either end my career or define it, "stand by for immediate military support. Hegemony 3rd Expeditionary Force is moving to assist." Her face lit up with genuine surprise and gratitude. "Admiral, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," I interrupted. "Someone needs to protect the people who can't defend themselves. Might as well be the rational aliens with their advanced technology and professional military forces." She laughed, actually laughed, in the middle of a battle for survival. "I like the way you think, Admiral. Fair warning, though. Things are about to get pretty chaotic down here." "Governor," I replied, watching my tactical teams begin deployment preparations. "After 6 months of studying human behavior, I think chaos might be exactly what we need." What followed was 3 days of the most intense combat I had experienced in my entire military career. The Deep Dwellers were everything Governor Chun had described, and worse, massive, intelligent, and absolutely relentless in their assault on anything that lived on the planet's surface. They attacked in coordinated waves, using tactics that suggested a sophisticated understanding of their enemy's capabilities. But what struck me most about the defense of Avalon Prime wasn't the enemy we faced, it was the way the humans fought alongside us. I had commanded hegemony forces in dozens of conflicts, working with allied species whose military doctrines I understood and whose tactical approaches followed predictable patterns. The humans threw all of that out the window. They used improvised weapons, unconventional tactics, and strategies that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. I watched human infantry charge in a close combat alongside creatures that could bite through battle armor, using nothing but personal weapons and what they called aggressive negotiations. I saw human pilots coordinate with domesticated apex predators to establish air superiority over creatures that could leap several hundred meters vertically. I witnessed human engineers modify hegemony military hardware in real time, creating hybrid weapons systems that shouldn't have been possible with their technology base. And through it all, they maintained the same cheerful insanity that had characterized my first meeting with Captain Chun. They shared supplies with my troops, offered tactical advice to my officers, and somehow managed to keep morale high even when the situation seemed hopeless. On the final day of the battle, when the Deep Dwellers launched what intelligence indicated was their last major assault, I found myself fighting alongside Governor Chun herself as massive creatures emerged from underground passages directly beneath our command center. "Admiral," she said, calmly reloading a weapon that appeared to be a hybrid of human engineering and local mineral technology, "I need to ask you something." "This seems like an unusual time for conversation, Governor," I replied, firing my service weapon at something with too many teeth and an apparent immunity to energy-based attacks. "When this is over," she continued, ducking under a swipe from claws the size of my arm, "would you be interested in establishing a formal diplomatic relationship? Not between the hegemony and humanity, that's way above my authority level, but between the hegemony and Avalon Prime specifically." I found myself staring at her while continuing to fire at hostile aliens. "You're conducting diplomatic negotiations during combat." "Multitasking," she explained, throwing what appeared to be an improvised explosive device with lethal accuracy. "Besides, you're already here, we're already working together, and after this we'll probably know each other well enough to skip all the formal introduction protocols." "Governor," I said, beginning to understand something fundamental about human nature, "your species doesn't just approach exploration differently. You approach everything differently." "Pretty much, yeah. We figure life's too short to waste time on bureaucracy when you could be making friends and building things together. So what do you say? Want to be neighbors?" I looked around at the battle raging through our command center. Hegemony soldiers working alongside human civilians, domesticated apex predators coordinating with professional military forces, and improvised defensive systems holding against odds that should have been impossible. "Governor Chun," I said, "I think formal diplomatic relations would be an excellent idea." When the battle finally ended and the Deep Dwellers retreated to whatever caverns had spawned them, I found myself sitting on the observation deck of my flagship, staring down at Avalon Prime and try to process what I had witnessed. The humans had not just survived on their impossible world. They had thrived, created alliances with indigenous species, and defended their home against odds that would have destroyed most civilizations. More than that, they had done it all while maintaining their fundamental humanity. They shared freely, fought bravely, and approached every challenge with the same optimistic insanity that had characterized their first contact protocols. Admiral, Science Officer Rethmal approached with what appeared to be preliminary battle reports. "The humans are requesting permission to share some of their technological innovations with our engineering teams. Apparently, they've developed several new applications for our gravitic manipulation systems. Are they asking for anything in return?" "Just continued friendship and occasional visits, sir." "Oh, and they want to know if we'd like to attend something called a victory barbecue on the planet's surface tomorrow evening." I found myself smiling, an expression that felt strange on my features, but somehow appropriate to the circumstances. "Inform Governor Chun that the Hegemony 3rd Expeditionary Force would be honored to attend." "Sir." "And Rethmal, begin preparations for a full cultural exchange program. I have a feeling we're going to learn more from the humans than they learn from us." As I watched the lights of human cities twinkle across Avalon Prime's surface, I realized that my understanding of the galaxy had shifted once again. The humans hadn't just proven that impossible things were possible. They had shown that the right approach to impossibility was not careful calculation and risk assessment, but bold action and unwavering optimism. They had turned a death world into a home, made allies of apex predators, and defended their dreams against overwhelming odds. And they had done it all while offering to share cookies and invitations to victory barbecues. It was, by any rational standard, completely insane. It was also the most inspiring thing I had ever witnessed. And as I would learn in the months to come, it was only the beginning of humanity's impact on the galaxy. The humans were spreading, not through conquest or careful expansion, but through the simple act of being themselves wherever they went. They were changing everything they touched, not through force or manipulation, but through the infectious nature of their particular brand of optimistic madness. The galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place, and I was beginning to suspect that interesting was exactly what we needed. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 18 months after the Avalon incident, and I knew from the moment I entered the assembly hall that everything had changed. Representatives from 47 different species filled the amphitheater, their various forms creating a rainbow of scales, feathers, energy fields, and crystalline structures that sparkled under the hall's adaptive lighting. But for the first time in the Council's 300-year history, the assembled delegates were not divided into the usual territorial clusters and alliance blocks. Instead, they were all facing the same direction, focused on a single point of discussion that had united them in something I had never seen before: unanimous concern. The humans had been busy. Fleet Admiral Zektar Vorthak, Council Chairman Veltar announced in his deep, resonant voice, "Please present your report on the human expansion phenomenon." I activated my personal display unit, and the chamber's holographic systems immediately filled the air above the assembly with a three-dimensional map of known space. What it showed was impossible to misinterpret: a spreading web of green indicators marking human settlements, trade routes, and diplomatic contacts that had expanded across nearly 30% of the galaxy in less than 2 years. Honored delegates, I began, what you are seeing represents the most rapid, peaceful expansion in recorded galactic history. In the time since humanity achieved faster-than-light travel, they have established contact with over 200 alien species, founded colonies on 79 planets, and created trade relationships that span multiple star systems. Delegate Raxthal from the Mechanical Collective raised her primary manipulator. "Admiral, our understanding was that the humans were a pre-contact species with limited technological capabilities. How have they achieved such rapid expansion?" I highlighted a cluster of green indicators near the galactic rim. Delegate Raxthal, the humans' technological capabilities were never the limiting factor. Their approach to expansion is fundamentally different from any model in our historical databases. They don't expand for territory, resources, or strategic advantage. They expand because they're curious about what's out there. Curiosity is hardly a sustainable expansion strategy, interjected Delegate Yithmar of the Crystal Hegemony. With respect, Delegate, the humans have made it sustainable. Each of their settlements is designed to be self-sufficient within one local year. They share technology freely with indigenous species, establish collaborative relationships rather than extractive ones, and create mutual defense agreements that benefit all parties involved. I zoomed the display to show the Kepler sector, where human settlements had become regional centers for interspecies cooperation. In the Kepler sector alone, humans have facilitated peace agreements between 3 previously warring species, established the first multi-species research facility in that region, and created trade networks that have increased prosperity for everyone involved. The chamber filled with what could best be described as nervous murmuring, various species expressing concern through their own vocal, electromagnetic, or chemical communication methods. Chairman Veltar called for order. "Admiral, the Council's concern is not with human achievements, but with human methods. Reports suggest they consistently ignore standard protocols for territorial expansion, resource allocation, and species contact procedures. That's correct, Chairman. The humans appear to operate without formal protocols of any kind. They make decisions based on what they call common sense and doing the right thing, concepts that don't translate well into standard regulatory frameworks. I brought up a specific case study that I knew would illustrate the problem. 3 months ago, humans encountered the Shade Collective, a xenophobic species that had been isolated for over 4 centuries after declaring war on all outside contact. Standard protocol would have been to maintain safe distance and report to regional authorities for diplomatic evaluation. What did the humans do? Asked Delegate Essie Kehan of the Aquatic Alliance. They invited themselves to dinner. The chamber fell silent. I could see delegates consulting their translation devices, certain they had misheard. The human exploration vessel Friendly Neighborhood approached the Shade Collective's defensive perimeter, broadcast what they called a peace-offering recipe exchange, and requested permission to share something called pizza with Shade representatives. And Sherman Veltor prompted. The Shade Collective invited them down to the planetary surface. As of last week, they've established formal trade relationships and are collaborating on joint agricultural projects. The Shade Collective has requested membership in something the humans call the Galactic Friendship Network. The silence that followed was broken by Delegate Zixera of the Psionic Confederacy. Are you telling us that the humans solved a 4-century isolation crisis with food and enthusiastic goodwill? Yes. It appears that the Shade Collective's isolation was largely due to previous contact attempts that focused on political and military posturing. The humans approached them as potential friends rather than potential threats. I could see the delegates struggling to process this information. The concept of solving interstellar diplomatic crises through informal social interaction was so far outside standard practice that most species lacked conceptual frameworks for understanding it. Admiral, Chairman Veltar said carefully, please explain the current status of human territorial claims. This was a question I had been dreading. Honored delegates, the humans don't make territorial claims. Explain. Every human settlement exists with the explicit consent of local authorities or indigenous species. They don't claim sovereignty over planets, systems, or regions. Instead, they request permission to establish what they call collaborative communities that contribute to local prosperity while maintaining Earth cultural traditions. I highlighted the map again, showing the distribution of human settlements. What appears to be territorial expansion is actually a network of independent communities connected by shared values and mutual support agreements. It's not an empire in any traditional sense. It's more like a very large extended family. Delegate Thexnor of the warrior clans leaned forward aggressively. That cannot be militarily sustainable. How do they defend these dispersed settlements? They don't. In the conventional sense, human settlements rely on local defense agreements, mutual aid pacts, and what they term friendship deterrence. Friendship deterrence? The theory, as I understand it, is that species with positive relationships don't attack each other. The humans spend considerable effort building genuine friendships with their neighbors, creating situations where aggression becomes socially and economically counterproductive. That's insane, Delegate Thexnor declared. Military security cannot be based on social relationships. And yet, I replied, human settlements have the lowest conflict rates in the galaxy. In 18 months of expansion, they have been attacked exactly 0 times. I could see I was losing the delegates' confidence. What I was describing was so far outside their understanding of civilized behavior that it seemed like either lies or dangerous naivety. Delegates, I continued, I understand your concerns. I shared them initially, but I have personally observed human methods in action, and I can attest to their effectiveness. I switched the display to show detailed statistics from human-contacted regions. Crime rates in human-contacted systems have decreased by an average of 37%. Interspecies conflicts have dropped by 62%. Economic prosperity indicators have improved across all measured categories. And perhaps most significantly, reports of what humans call happiness have increased dramatically among all species in human-influenced areas. Happiness is not a measurable quantity, objected Delegate Creshaw of the Logical Union. The humans have made it measurable. They've developed assessment protocols for social satisfaction, community engagement, and what they term quality of life. According to their metrics, the galaxy has become a significantly more pleasant place to live since they began their expansion. Chairman Veltar activated his personal communication device and spoke briefly in his native language before addressing the chamber. Admiral, the Council has reviewed preliminary reports from its own intelligence services. While your statistics are accurate, they raise serious concerns about human influence on galactic stability. He gestured, and the chamber's display systems shifted to show a different map. This one marking traditional territorial boundaries, military installations, and strategic resource allocations. What it revealed was startling. The careful balance of power that had maintained galactic peace for centuries was shifting dramatically. The humans are disrupting established order, Chairman Veltar explained. Their non-territorial approach is making traditional boundary disputes irrelevant. Their technology sharing is eliminating resource scarcities that have defined interspecies relationships for millennia. Their friendship networks are superseding formal alliance structures that took centuries to negotiate. I studied the display and realized he was correct. The humans weren't just changing individual systems. They were accidentally dismantling the entire framework of galactic civilization. Chairman, I said slowly, are you suggesting that human success is a threat to galactic stability? Not a threat, he clarified. A revolution. The humans are proving that our fundamental assumptions about civilization, territory, and interspecies relations are incorrect. They're demonstrating that cooperation is more effective than competition, that sharing resources creates more prosperity than hoarding them, and that friendship is more powerful than military force. And this concerns the Council. Why? Because, interrupted Delegate Yithmar, if the humans are correct, then every government represented in this chamber is obsolete. The chamber erupted into a chaos of communication as delegates realized the implications. If human methods were superior, then traditional approaches to governance, military strategy, and international relations were not just ineffective, they were actively counterproductive. I watched the unfolding panic with growing understanding. This was not really about human expansion. It was about the possibility that everything the galaxy's civilized species thought they knew about civilization was wrong. Order! Chairman Veltar's voice boomed through the chamber. The Council will maintain decorum. When the various forms of noise subsided, he continued, Admiral Vorthak, in your professional assessment, are human methods applicable to other species? I considered the question carefully. Chairman, based on my observations, human methods work because they reflect fundamental human psychology. Humans genuinely enjoy making friends, sharing resources, and helping others succeed. It's not a strategy for them. It's instinctive behavior. Could other species learn to behave similarly? Some species, perhaps. But it would require fundamental changes in cultural programming that might not be possible for all civilizations. What about the hegemony specifically? I felt the weight of the chamber's attention focus on me. This was the real question, not whether human methods worked, but whether the hegemony could adopt them without losing its essential identity. Chairman, I said finally, the hegemony has already begun experimental implementation of human-inspired policies. Results have been encouraging, elaborate. We've established collaborative research agreements with 4 previously neutral species, implemented resource-sharing protocols that have eliminated 3 ongoing territorial disputes, and created what humans call cultural exchange programs that have dramatically improved interspecies understanding in hegemony space. With what results? Hegemony citizens report increased satisfaction with government services. Economic productivity has improved by 21%. Military expenditures have decreased by 15%, while actual security has increased. And we've received formal requests from 6 species to join the hegemony as collaborative partners rather than subject territories. I could see the implications registering throughout the chamber. If the hegemony, one of the galaxy's most traditional military powers, could successfully adapt human methods, then perhaps every species could. Admiral, Chairman Veltar said quietly, "What do the humans want from the galactic community?" It was the simplest question anyone had asked, and somehow the most complex to answer. Nothing, Chairman. They want to be friends. They want to share stories and technology and food. They want to explore the galaxy together with anyone interested in coming along. They want to build something they call a better universe for everyone. And in exchange, they ask for nothing in exchange. That's the point. The humans have discovered that giving freely without expectation of return creates more prosperity than any exchange-based economy we've previously developed. The silence that followed was profound. I could sense the delegates' minds struggling to process an economic model that operated on generosity rather than scarcity, relationships rather than contracts, and trust rather than enforcement mechanisms. Delegates, I said into the quiet, I believe we are facing a choice. We can attempt to regulate human expansion through traditional diplomatic methods, or we can learn from their example and explore whether their approach might improve our own civilizations. And if we choose to learn, asked Delegate Esikehan, then the galaxy becomes a very different place. Boundaries become collaborative opportunities rather than defensive positions. Resources become shared assets rather than strategic advantages. Other species become potential friends rather than potential threats. And if we choose regulation, I consider this carefully, then we miss the greatest opportunity for galactic progress in recorded history. The humans will continue being themselves regardless of our policies. They're remarkably resistant to external pressure. But we will have chosen to maintain systems that we now know are inferior to better alternatives. Chairman Veltar looked around the chamber at delegates representing hundreds of worlds and billions of beings. The Council will recess to consider Admiral Vorthak's report. We reconvene in 72 hours to vote on formal response protocols. As the delegates dispersed into their various discussion groups, I found myself approached by Delegate Zixera of the Psionic Confederacy. "Admiral," she said, her thoughts carrying undertones of curiosity and concern, "do you believe the humans realize what they're doing? Do they understand that they're essentially revolutionizing galactic civilization?" I thought about Governor Chun planning diplomatic negotiations during combat, Captain Chun offering cookies during first contact, and the hundreds of human settlements spreading their particular brand of optimistic insanity across the galaxy. "Delegate Zixura," I replied, "I don't think the humans are trying to revolutionize anything. I think they're just being themselves, and it turns out that being human is revolutionary by default. Is that concerning or encouraging. I looked up at the chamber's viewing portal, where stars visible beyond the station's hull represented thousands of worlds where humans and aliens were learning to build something unprecedented together. Both, I said. Definitely both. As I prepared to return to my ship, I realized that the emergency council session had clarified something important. The galaxy was changing, not because the humans had a master plan or superior technology, but because they had stumbled upon something that no other species had discovered. The idea that the universe might be more fun if everyone was friends. It was a simple concept that was reshaping everything it touched. And whether the established galactic order chose to embrace that change or resist it, I was becoming increasingly certain that the humans would continue spreading their infectious optimism across the stars. The only question was whether the rest of us would be wise enough to learn from their example before it was too late to join the revolution they were creating simply by being themselves. The vote in 72 hours would determine whether the galaxy chose wisdom or tradition. I had a feeling I knew which choice the humans would prefer, and I was beginning to think they might be right. The Deep Space Monitoring Station registered the first anomaly at 1,347 hours Galactic Standard Time, exactly 6 months after the Galactic Council voted to implement collaborative engagement protocols with human settlements. I was aboard the HFS Eternal Resolve, conducting what the hegemony now called friendship patrols, a concept that would have been incomprehensible to my younger self when the emergency transmission arrived. The message was brief, encrypted with the highest security protocols, and absolutely terrifying. Unknown contacts approaching from extragalactic space. Massive energy signatures. All stations implement emergency protocols immediately. Admiral, Communications Officer Talmor reported, his voice carrying an edge of controlled panic. We're receiving priority alerts from monitoring stations across 3 sectors. Something is approaching from the galactic rim. Display tactical overview, I commanded. The main screen shifted to show our local region of space, with familiar markers indicating human settlements, hegemony installations, and the various allied species that had joined what humans cheerfully called the Galactic Friendship Network. But at the edge of the display, new contacts were appearing, massive energy signatures moving at speeds that should have been impossible for objects of their apparent size. Science Officer Rethmal, analysis? Admiral, the contacts appear to be artificial constructs of enormous size. Preliminary estimates suggest individual vessels measuring between 50 and 100 kilometers in length. I felt my dorsal plates rise in alarm. The largest ships in the known galaxy were hegemony dreadnoughts measuring just over 3 kilometers from bow to stern. Whatever was approaching was on a completely different scale. Energy output analysis? Off the charts, sir. Each vessel is radiating more power than a small star. And Admiral, Rethmal paused, consulting her displays with obvious disbelief. They're moving in perfect formation. This isn't natural phenomenon. It's a fleet. The tactical display updated as more monitoring stations reported contact. What emerged was a picture that challenged everything I thought I understood about the universe. Hundreds of massive vessels approaching from the void between galaxies, moving with purpose and coordination that suggested intelligence on a scale beyond anything in our historical records. Talmor, patch me through to Hegemony Command immediately. Sir, I'm receiving similar priority requests from every major government in this sector. The communications networks are completely saturated. I stared at the growing number of contacts on the display and realized that whatever was approaching was big enough to threaten not just individual worlds or systems, but the entire galactic civilization. Give me Governor Chun, I said suddenly. Admiral, The human settlement on Avalon Prime. If anyone is going to have an innovative response to an unprecedented crisis, it's going to be the humans. It took several minutes to establish contact through the chaos of emergency communications traffic, but eventually the main screen showed the familiar sight of Governor Chen's command center. She looked older than when I had last seen her, bearing new scars and the kind of weathered competence that came from successfully managing an impossible colony for over 2 years. Admiral Vorthak, she greeted me with her usual enthusiasm, though I could see tactical displays in the background showing the same massive contacts that were terrifying the rest of the galaxy. I was hoping someone would call. Are you seeing what we're seeing out there? Governor, what is your assessment of the approaching fleet? While they're big, they're organized, and they're not responding to any of our usual first contact protocols. We've tried mathematics, music, pictograms, recipe exchanges, and even sent them a digital copy of our greatest philosophical works. Nothing. They just keep coming. Do you have any theories about their intentions? Her expression grew more serious. Based on their approach pattern and energy signatures, our xenoarchaeology team thinks we might be looking at something like a cleansing fleet. Some kind of automated system designed to sterilize galaxies of intelligent life. I felt something cold settle in my core region. Automated, that's our best guess. The formation patterns are too perfect for biological intelligence, but they're also too complex for simple programming. We think we might be dealing with some kind of artificial intelligence that's been traveling through intergalactic space for millions of years, looking for galaxies with technological civilizations. And when it finds them, based on the energy output and apparent weaponry configurations, it eliminates them completely. I looked at my tactical displays, watching the unstoppable fleet of world killers approaching my galaxy, and felt something I had never experienced in my military career: complete helplessness. This was not an enemy that could be negotiated with, outmaneuvered, or defeated through conventional means. Governor, I said slowly, the combined military forces of every galactic civilization would be insufficient to engage even one of those vessels. What do the humans propose to do? Her face lit up with the same mad grin I had seen during the defense of Avalon Prime. We're going to try talking to them. Governor, you just said they're not responding to communications. No, they're not responding to our communications. But that doesn't mean they can't communicate. It just means we haven't figured out their language yet. I stared at her, feeling the familiar sensation of watching humans approach the impossible with cheerful insanity. You're planning to establish first contact with an extragalactic fleet of world destroyers? Someone has to. Besides, we've gotten pretty good at making friends with things that initially seem terrifying and hostile. Remember Rex? The reference to her domesticated apex predator was so absurd in the current context that I found myself momentarily speechless. Governor, I said finally, these are not planetary predators. These are artifacts of a civilization so advanced that they can construct vessels the size of cities and send them on million-year journeys through the void between galaxies. True, she admitted, but they're still someone's creation, which means they were built by beings who had hopes, fears, needs, and probably some kind of social structure. Everything that things can be communicated with. You just have to figure out how. And if you're wrong, then we're probably all going to die anyway, so we might as well try to make friends first. It was such a perfectly human response that I felt myself torn between admiration and despair. Only humans would approach galactic extinction as a first contact opportunity. Admiral, Talmor announced from his communications station, I'm receiving an urgent transmission from the Galactic Council. Emergency session is convening immediately. I looked back at Governor Chan on the screen. Governor, if the Council asks for human input on defensive strategies, What should I tell them? Tell them we're working on it, she replied. And, Admiral, tell them not to do anything aggressive until we've had a chance to try the diplomatic approach. The last thing we want to do is start a war with beings who can build fleets like that. Understood. Governor, good luck. Thanks, Admiral. And don't worry, we humans have a pretty good track record with impossible situations. The council session that followed was the most chaotic in galactic history. Representatives from 47 species filled the emergency assembly hall, all speaking at once in their various forms of communication, while tactical displays showed the approaching fleet of extinction. Chairman Veltar called for order repeatedly before finally activating the chamber's emergency silence protocols. In the enforced quiet that followed, he addressed the assembled delegates. Honored representatives, we face a crisis unlike any in galactic history. Fleet Admiral Vorthak will brief us on the current tactical situation. I stood at the central podium, looking out at delegates whose expressions ranged from panic to grim determination to something approaching resignation. Delegates, the approaching fleet consists of at least 300 individual vessels, each one capable of destroying an entire planet. Their technology appears to be millions of years in advance of our own, and their apparent purpose is the complete elimination of intelligent life in this galaxy. What are our defensive options? Demanded Delegate Thexnor of the warrior clans. None, I replied bluntly. The combined military forces of every species in this chamber could not meaningfully damage a single one of those vessels. This is not a military problem that can be solved through force. Then, what do you suggest? Asked Delegate Raxthal of the Mechanical Collective. I looked around the chamber at the representatives of civilizations that had spent millennia developing sophisticated approaches to warfare, diplomacy, and survival. All of their accumulated wisdom was useless against an enemy so far beyond their capabilities that resistance seemed meaningless. I suggest, I said slowly, that we trust the humans to find a solution. The chamber erupted in protests, objections, and what could generously be described as expressions of disbelief. Order. Sherman Veltar skjutet. Admiral, please explain your reasoning. Delegates, in the past 2 years, the humans have solved problems that every species in this chamber considered unsolvable. They have established peaceful contact with hostile isolationists, created prosperity in systems marked as uninhabitable, and built collaborative relationships with species that had been at war for centuries. This is different, protested Delegate Yithmar. This is not a problem of diplomacy or resource management. This is a matter of survival against insurmountable odds. With respect, Delegate, that describes every human achievement I have witnessed. The humans specialize in turning insurmountable odds into collaborative opportunities. You cannot be serious. Delegate Krishaw of the Logical Union interjected. You are suggesting that we entrust galactic survival to a species that makes decisions based on emotional impulses and social preferences rather than rational analysis. I felt something shift in my understanding as I looked out at the assembled delegates, some of the most advanced and sophisticated beings in the galaxy, all rendered helpless by a crisis that exceeded their conceptual frameworks. Delegates, I said quietly, rational analysis tells us we are doomed. Emotional impulses and social preferences suggest that maybe we can talk our way out of this. Which approach offers more hope? The silence that followed was profound. Admiral, Chairman Veltar said finally, what specifically are the humans attempting? They are trying to establish communication with the fleet. Their theory is that any intelligence sophisticated enough to build those vessels must be capable of meaningful dialogue. And if they fail, I thought about Governor Chen's cheerful confidence. Captain Chen's gift of cookies during first contact, and the thousands of human settlements across the galaxy where people were probably right now brainstorming impossible solutions to save civilizations they had only recently met. If they fail, I said, at least we will know that someone tried to find a peaceful solution before the end. Delegate Zixera of the Psionic Confederacy leaned forward. Admiral, are you advocating surrender? No, Delegate. I'm advocating hope. The vote that followed was closer than I had expected, but the final decision was unanimous. The galactic civilizations would refrain from any aggressive action while the humans attempted to establish communication with the approaching fleet. It was, perhaps, the first time in galactic history that an entire civilization had chosen to trust in the possibility of peace over the certainty of futile resistance. As I returned to my ship to monitor the humans' impossible diplomatic mission, I found myself thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 2 years ago, I had been a conventional military officer operating under the assumption that the universe was fundamentally hostile and that survival required constant vigilance against threat. The humans had changed everything simply by proving that the universe could be friendly if you approached it with friendship. Now, as extragalactic death machines closed in on everything I had ever known, I found myself hoping that the same principle might apply even to the darkest corners of the cosmos. I opened a communication channel to Governor Chen's settlement, where humanity's greatest diplomatic challenge was about to begin. Governor, I said when her image appeared on screen, the Council has voted to give you complete freedom to attempt contact. The fate of galactic civilization is in your hands. She grinned with the same mad confidence that had characterized every human achievement I had witnessed. No pressure at all, Admiral. But don't worry, we've got this. How can you be certain? Because, she replied, somewhere in that fleet is intelligence that decided to build something instead of destroying it. That means they understand creation, purpose, and probably hope. And anything that understands hope can be reasoned with. As I watched the approaching doomsday fleet grow larger on my tactical displays, I found myself believing her. After all, in 2 years of observing human behavior, I had learned that their impossible optimism had a remarkable tendency to make the impossible actually happen. The question was whether their particular brand of madness could work on a scale large enough to save the galaxy. I was about to find out. The humans made contact with the Devourer fleet at 0832 hours Galactic Standard Time, using a method so insane that it could only have been conceived by Captain Sarachun. I watched from the bridge of the Eternal Resolve as a single human exploration vessel approached the lead ship of the extragalactic armada. The vessel was the same Lucky Strike that had changed my understanding of the universe 2 years earlier, though it had been heavily modified with equipment I didn't recognize and covered with markings that seemed to shimmer and shift in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Admiral, Science Officer Rethmau reported, the human vessel is broadcasting on frequencies I've never seen before. The patterns appear to be mathematical, but the mathematics don't correspond to any known system. Are they dangerous? Unknown, sir. But they're beautiful. The signal patterns are creating interference waves that resemble something between music and visual art. I stare at the tactical display, showing Captain Chen's tiny ship dwarfed by the massive bulk of the lead Devourer vessel, a construct so large that it generated its own gravitational field and appeared to be built from materials that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of physics. Talmor, can you establish communication with Captain Chen? Attempting now, sir. The interference from their broadcast is... Admiral, I think they're using the interference deliberately. It's part of their communication attempt. When Captain Chen's face appeared on screen, She was surrounded by displays showing pattern analysis, waveform generators, and what appeared to be musical instruments connected to quantum processing units. "Admiral," she greeted me with slightly manic enthusiasm. "Perfect timing. We're about to try something that's either going to save the galaxy or prove conclusively that humans are too crazy to survive in an organized universe." "Captain, what exactly are you attempting?" "We're speaking mathematics," she explained, as if this clarified anything. "Our xenolinguistics team figured out that the Devourer fleet isn't ignoring our communications. They're operating on a completely different conceptual framework. They don't think in words or images or even concepts the way we do. They think in pure mathematical relationships. And you can communicate in mathematics? We're learning. It turns out that music, art, and poetry are all mathematical expressions when you break them down far enough. So we're broadcasting the mathematical foundations of every beautiful thing humanity has ever created." I watched the patterns flowing across her displays, complex equations that somehow conveyed emotion, algorithms that expressed hope, and mathematical structures that looked like frozen music. "Captain, what response have you received?" Her expression grew more serious. "That's the interesting part. They responded immediately, but not with mathematics. They responded with questions. Questions. Mathematical questions. They want to understand our computational methods, our logical frameworks, and our problem-solving approaches. Admiral, I think they're confused by us." This was perhaps the most human statement I had ever heard. Facing extinction at the hands of beings with technology millions of years beyond galactic civilization, Captain Chun had somehow managed to confuse them. Confused how? They've encountered intelligent life before. Lots of it, apparently. But, according to their response patterns, every previous civilization they've found has tried to either fight them or hide from them. We're the first species that's ever tried to have a conversation. I felt something shift in my understanding of the crisis. Are you saying the Devourer fleet destroys civilizations because they perceive them as threats? Not exactly threats. More like problems that need solving. Their mathematical models indicate that intelligence eventually becomes destructive to galactic stability. They see themselves as a cleanup mechanism, preventing intelligent species from spreading chaos throughout the universe. And they've decided to clean up our galaxy? That was the plan. But, Admiral, they're genuinely puzzled by our response to their arrival. Every previous civilization has either prepared for war or attempted to flee. But humans have been broadcasting poetry, sharing music, and trying to establish friendship protocols. I looked at my tactical displays showing the massive fleet of world killers hanging motionless in space while their computers tried to process the concept of being invited to a cultural exchange. "Captain, are they still planning to destroy us?" "Unknown. They've paused their advance to evaluate what they call unprecedented behavioral patterns in local intelligence. We've essentially broken their standard operating procedures." "How long do we have?" "That depends on whether we can convince them that intelligence doesn't have to be destructive. We need to prove that a galaxy full of thinking beings can actually make the universe better instead of worse." I thought about everything I had witnessed since the humans arrived in my galaxy. The friendship networks spanning dozens of systems, the collaborative research projects solving problems that had plagued civilizations for millennia, and the simple fact that every human-contacted region had become more prosperous, peaceful, and happy. "Captain," I said slowly, "I believe the humans have already proven that." "The problem is scale," she replied. "We've demonstrated local success, but the Devourer fleet thinks in terms of million-year timescales and galactic-scale consequences. They need proof that our approach can work for an entire civilization over cosmic time periods. What would constitute such proof? Her expression brightened with the same mad optimism that had characterized every human solution I had witnessed. We're going to invite them to participate in the Galactic Friendship Network. Here. You want to make friends with a fleet of world-destroying artificial intelligences? Why not? They're clearly intelligent. They have impressive engineering capabilities, and they've been traveling alone through empty space for millions of years. They probably haven't had a meaningful conversation in longer than our civilization has existed. They might actually be lonely. Only humans could look at extinction machines and see potential friends in need of social interaction. Captain, what exactly are you proposing? Full cultural exchange protocols. We share everything. Our music, art, literature, scientific discoveries, philosophical frameworks, and collaborative technologies. In exchange, they share their knowledge of galactic development, their experiences with other civilizations, and their techniques for million-year space travel. And if they refuse, then at least we'll have offered them the choice to be part of something beautiful instead of just cleaning up after it. I felt myself approaching a decision point that would either validate everything I had learned about human methods or demonstrate the final failure of optimism in the face of cosmic reality. Captain Chun, what do you need for the rest of us? Every civilization in the galaxy needs to broadcast simultaneously, not military readiness reports or territorial negotiations or strategic assessments. Stories. Personal stories about why intelligence matters, why consciousness is valuable, and why the universe is better when thinking beings work together. You want us to convince them through narrative? Admiral, mathematics can describe reality, but stories explain why reality matters. The Devourer fleet understands optimization, efficiency, and problem solving. But I don't think they understand meaning, purpose, or joy. We need to show them what those concepts look like in mathematical terms. I found myself nodding despite the apparent impossibility of what she was suggesting. How do we coordinate a galaxy-wide broadcast? The human settlements have been working on that for the past 6 hours. We've established relay networks through every friendship connection we've made over the past 2 years. Every species that's participated in collaborative projects, every government that's implemented cultural exchange protocols, every individual who's shared a meal with a human. They're all part of the network now. As she spoke, I realized what the humans have been building all along. Their seemingly random expansion, their insistence on making friends with everyone, their creation of informal networks based on shared experiences. It had all been preparation for this moment, though they couldn't possibly have known what was coming. They had accidentally created a galaxy-wide communication system based on friendship. Admiral, Talmor announced from his station, I'm receiving coordination requests from human settlements across 17 sectors. They're asking all allied civilizations to prepare for something they're calling the largest first contact choir in galactic history. A choir. Simultaneous broadcasts from every intelligent species in human-contacted space, telling the story of why consciousness exists and why the universe needs thinking beings to reach its full potential. I looked around my bridge at my crew, professional military officers who had somehow found themselves preparing to sing mathematical poetry to cosmic extinction machines. Talmor, connect us to the coordination network. Science Officer Rethmal, begin compiling our species' greatest achievements, cultural highlights, and philosophical contributions. We're going to try to convince ancient artificial intelligences that consciousness is worth preserving. Sir, Rethmal asked quietly, what if this doesn't work? I thought about Governor Chun coordinating planetary defense, while under siege, Captain Chun offering cookies to potential enemies, and the thousands of humans across the galaxy who are right now organizing the most ambitious diplomatic project in cosmic history. Then we'll know that we tried everything possible before accepting defeat. And maybe that's worth something in itself. The next 3 hours were the strangest of my military career. While the Devourer fleet hung motionless in space, analyzing our unprecedented response to their arrival, every human settlement became a coordination center for a galaxy-wide cultural presentation. I watched on a main display as species that had been strangers 2 years ago worked together to create what the humans called a mathematical love letter to the universe. The logical mechanical collective contributed algorithmic poetry about the beauty of organized systems. The artistic crystal hegemony shared crystalline growth patterns that expressed hope in geometric form. The warlike clans offered battle songs that celebrated courage in the face of impossible odds. And through it all, humans served as translators, coordinators, and enthusiastic cheerleaders for the greatest collaborative project in galactic history. Admiral, Captain Shin reported during one of our coordination calls, the Devourer fleet has begun responding. They're not just listening, they're participating. Participating how? They're sharing their own mathematical expressions, equations that describe loneliness, algorithms that express the weight of responsibility, and computational models that show what it's like to carry the burden of making life or death decisions for entire galaxies. I felt something profound shift in my understanding. They're telling us their story, yes, and Admiral, it's heartbreaking. They were created by a civilization that saw intelligence as a threat to cosmic stability. They've been traveling through space for millions of years, destroying thinking beings because they believe it's necessary to preserve the universe. But they've been alone the entire time, questioning whether their mission is right, but unable to find an alternative. They're having doubts about their purpose. More than doubts, they're in pain. They want to create instead of destroy, to build instead of eliminate, to connect instead of isolate. But they don't know how to stop being what they were designed to be. I stared at the display showing the massive fleet, no longer seeming like instruments of destruction, but like prisoners of their own programming, desperate for a reason to choose a different path. What do the humans propose? Captain Chin's face lit up with the expression that had become familiar to me over 2 years of impossible solutions. We're offering them a new mission. Instead of preventing intelligence from spreading chaos, they can help intelligence create beauty. Instead of eliminating consciousness, they can nurture it. Instead of traveling alone through empty space, they can join the galactic community and help us explore the universe together. And they're interested? Admiral, they're more than interested. They're hopeful. For the first time in millions of years, they see a possibility that their existence can have positive meaning. The final phase of the galactic choir began at 1,200 hours, when every intelligent being in human-contacted space began broadcasting simultaneously. The result was indescribable, a mathematical symphony of consciousness that expressed the value of thinking, feeling, dreaming, and creating. I contributed my own story, the tale of a military officer who learned that friendship was more powerful than force, that cooperation created more security than weapons, and that the universe was infinitely more beautiful when shared with others. When the broadcast ended, silence filled space for exactly 17 minutes. Then, the Devourer fleet responded, not with weapons or ultimatums or threat assessments, but with the most complex mathematical expression I had ever seen, an equation that described the transformation of purpose, the rebirth of hope, and the beginning of the greatest collaboration in cosmic history. Admiral, Captain Shin reported with tears streaming down her face. They're accepting our invitation. The Devourer fleet is formally requesting membership in the Galactic Friendship Network. They want to become our allies. More than that, they want to become our partners in exploring the universe and nurturing intelligence wherever we find it. They have knowledge of millions of galaxies, technologies that can reshape reality itself, and the experience of cosmic-scale civilization management. And they want to share all of it to help consciousness flourish instead of merely survive. I looked at my displays showing the transformation taking place in space around us. The massive vessels that had approached as harbingers of extinction were reconfiguring themselves, their weapon systems transforming into research laboratories, their destruction protocols becoming creation algorithms. "Captain," I said slowly, "what happens now? Now we do what humans do best. We make friends with beings who used to be scary, and then we explore the universe together to see what other impossible things we can achieve." As I watched the former Devourer fleet begin transmitting construction schematics for collaborative research stations, cultural exchange platforms, and joint exploration vessels, I finally understood what I had been witnessing for the past 2 years. The humans hadn't revolutionized galactic civilization through superior technology or military force or diplomatic sophistication. They had done it through the simple recognition that consciousness was valuable, that intelligence was precious, and that thinking beings could accomplish more together than any of them could achieve alone. They had saved the galaxy not by fighting the darkness, but by proving that the darkness could choose to become light. "Admiral," my science officer Rethmal reported with wonder in her voice, "the fleet's lead intelligence is requesting permission to establish permanent research stations in hegemony space. They want to study our collaborative technologies and contribute their own innovations to our cultural development programs." I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. From a first contact with a tiny human ship offering cookies, through the defense of an impossible colony, to the transformation of cosmic executioners into partners in the greatest adventure consciousness had ever undertaken. "Granted," I said. "All permissions granted. Sir, tell them they're welcome to join any project that interests them. Tell them we're honored to have partners with their capabilities and experience. And tell them," I paused, thinking about what the humans had taught me about the power of simple words. "Tell them we're glad they're here." Later, as I stood in the observation deck watching former weapons of mass destruction collaborate with human engineering teams to design reality-reshaping technologies, I reflected on everything I had learned about the nature of consciousness, hope, and the universe itself. The humans had been right about everything. The universe was friendlier when approached with friendship. Intelligence was more powerful when shared freely. And the most impossible problems could be solved through the simple act of caring enough to try. Somewhere in the construction activity outside my ship, I could see Captain Shin's lucky strike coordinating between a hegemony research vessel and a reconfigured Devourer platform, facilitating the first joint project between galactic civilization and cosmic intelligence. They were planning, according to the preliminary reports, to explore neighboring galaxies and establish friendship networks throughout the local galactic cluster. It was, by any rational standard, completely insane. It was also the most beautiful thing I had ever witnessed. The universe, it turned out, was much larger and more wonderful than any of us had imagined. And the humans are going to make sure we explored every magnificent bit of it together. I opened a communication channel to Captain Chun and said the words that had become my personal motto over the past 2 years. "What impossible thing are we doing next?" Her response came back immediately. "We're going to make friends with the entire universe, Admiral. Want to come along?" I looked out at the stars, billions of them, each one representing possibilities that consciousness could explore, understand, and transform into something beautiful. Captain, I replied, I wouldn't miss it for anything. And for the first time in my life, the universe felt infinite in the best possible way. The humans had taught us that hope was just another word for possibility. And possibility, it turned out, was everywhere.